Section 1 of Journal of Small Things. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Elroy. Journal of Small Things by Helen Gansevoort Edwards Mackay. From a House on a Road to Paris. Sunday, July 26th, 1914. When we came back from Mass, up from the village by the Rue de Château, and through the park and the garden, the yesterday's papers were arrived from Paris. I delayed down in the parterre. It was so beautiful. There had been rain, and the sunshine was golden and thick on all the wet, sweet things, the earth of the paths, the box edges, the clipped yews, the grass of the lawns, the roses and heliotrope and petunias in the stately garden beds. There is a certain smell in old formal gardens. That seems to me always to mean France. It is like the stab of an arrow. I feel it swiftly in my heart, and stop and hold my breath and say, "This is France." The news in the papers was strange. We thought we would go to the village, to the place, and feel what the village felt. We went along the terrace and around between the South Tower and the moat to the entrance court, and across the moat bridge, where the watchdogs were chained one on either side, to the green court, and out of the big wrought iron, vine-covered gates, to the Place aux Armes. All the village was there, in its Sunday dress, under the lime trees. The swallows were flying high about in the dungeon tower, and low across the big old grassy cobbles of the place. They were crying their strange little cry, I thought. They are calling for storm. And yet the sky was blue and gold behind the dungeon tower. We went to get the papers in the little dark shop that smells of spices and beeswax and shoe leather. I asked, what did Monsieur Créty think of the chances of war? He shrugged his old shoulders and said he had some fine fresh chocolate and nougat out from Paris. We went back and read the papers and ate the chocolates and nougat on the terrace. A host of little white butterflies kept clouding over the terrace steps between the pots of roses and heliotrope. There was a great brief thunderstorm while we were at lunch, and then the sun came out. We motored through the wet, sunshiny country, softly dipped and softly lifted, blue-green forest and wide, ripe harvest fields, blue and purple and crimson beet fields, low, long brown and rust-red towns with square church towers, Sunday people out in the doorways, and swallows always flying low and crying. We had tea in Soissons, at Maurizzi's, and went to the cathedral, where the offices were over, and to the pastry cook's, Monsieur Pigeot's, to buy some cherry tarts. Home by the long straight road between the poplars. It was so cold suddenly that one imagined autumn. There was a wind come up, and some yellow leaves were flying with it. After dinner we had a fire lighted in the tiled room. The heat brought out all the sweetness of the roses in the blue bowls, and the flames sent lovely lights and shadows to play along the old stone walls. I do not think I would be afraid if it were not for my dreams. Every night I had dreamt of galloping horses and thunder, or cannon, I don't know which, and of blood dripping and dripping down the chateau stairs. I see the blood in red pools on the worn old grey stone of the stairs, and in black stains on the new carpet. Some of the nights I have stayed up, walking the floor of my room, that I might not sleep and dream so horribly. Monday, July 27th. The papers make things look better. We think it cannot be, cannot possibly be. But I am always afraid because of my dreams. My dreams have been very bad all night. I was in the potager most of the morning, working hard. In the afternoon some neighbours came to tea. They came from quite far, motoring across the forests, and none of them had known the house. I loved showing them the old place that is not mine, the colours that have faded and worn till they have become beautiful, the things that by much belonging together are fallen into harmony. I do not believe that the people of these old houses can love them quite as hopelessly as strangers do. There is a certain special peculiar chateau smell that trails down long galleries and lingers on the stairs, that lurks in far corners of the rooms, and abides in all the cupboards and behind the tapestries, and in the big carved chests, that clings to the wood and waxed floors and stone, and stirs along the heavy sombre walls, and that means France, like the smell of old gardens of box and yew. It stabs one, always the arrowy perfume, and makes one feel France with an odd intensity. From a far away off, one would be homesick remembering it. We had Monsieur Pigeot's tarts for tea, and sat for a long time about the dining-room table, talking of how afraid we had been of war yesterday. We went up into the dungeon tower, and down into the souterrain, and then all along the rampart walls. I love the way the little town crowds up close to the ramparts, the cobbled grass-grown streets, the roofs all softened and coloured by ages and weathers. A child laughed down in the street. A woman called to it. There was a scamper of little feet, and the two of them were laughing together. Off beyond the roofs we could see the blonde of the ripe grain fields and the purple of the forests. I had so intensely a sense of its all being for the last time. I said to Manon, "It can't last. It is too beautiful." Tuesday, July 28th. One feels in all these days as if there were a great storm coming up. I keep thinking all of the time, there is a great storm coming up. That is an absurd thing to make note of, as if it had some strange meaning, as if it were not just that in all these days, really, always, there is a storm coming up. I never have known such storms, nor yet such sunsets. The sunsets are like the reflection of great battlefields beyond the world. One is frightened because of the sunsets, more than because of the storms. Every day while the sun shines, there is the rumble of thunder about all the horizon. It is like the cannon of my dreams. All the time, while the sun shines, great thunderclouds are gathering upon the horizon, mounting up from the horizon, white and yellow and purple and black. The sunshine is heavy and thick. You do not know if the sky is dark blue or purple, and at sunset the dark cloud shapes threaten and menace. Whatever one does, one has the feeling of doing it before the storm, in the teeth of the storm. When the storm does come, with its crashing and blinding, it brings no relief. It is as if these midsummer storms meant something for which the whole world waited. And that feeling of the end of things grows always stronger. There is no reason, nobody, here at least, troubles about war. This morning we were caught by a wonderful thunderstorm out in the fields. Now from the terrace we are watching the sunset, all of thunderclouds, purple and blue and black, and of fire. 3 of the white peacocks have come up to tea with us under the big cedar. Wednesday, July 29th, late of the night. I went up to Paris. I thought if I could feel how Paris felt today, I would know if the menace is real. Here one knows nothing. There is sunshine and rain, and the fields are white to the harvest. The heat hangs over the long white roads, and the shade of the forests is grateful. The people of the little town go about their ways. Their sabots clatter on the cobbles, and their voices have part with the shrilling of seagull and the call of the swallows. The children out of school, at noon and at sunset, play in the Place aux Armes, and the women come there to market in the mornings, under the limes, and after work the men lounge there against the moat wall. But since Sunday I have so strange a feeling, a sense of its being the end of things, the end of I don't know what. I want to make notes of things, not of the great things that are happening, but of the little things. I want to feel especially all the little everyday dear accustomed things, to take hold of the moods of them and gather up their memories, to be put away and kept, and turned back to always afterwards. I want to make notes of the sweetness of my room to wake to, all the garden coming in through the drawn blinds. I want to put away and keep my memory of the fragrance of the garden and its little voices, bird and bee and grasshopper and cricket and stirring leaf. I want to remember things I saw from my window, the terrace with its grey stone mossy parapet, the steps between the pots of heliotrope and roses, the parterre, the old vague statues, the crouching sphinxes, beautiful because they are broken and deep in roses, the trimmed yews, the paths and box borders and formal beds of flowers, the walls of trees around, the glimpses through the trees of the town's stained, blurred roofs, and of grain fields and the forests. I want to remember the little clover leaf table for my breakfast tray, the bowl of sweet peas, the taste of the raspberries. I want to remember the long gallery, the chateau smell in it, the clear green stir of the limes in the entrance court under its windows, the stairs that I kept dreaming about, with the dark Spanish pictures hung along them and the armour on their turnings. I want to remember the bird's nest in the lantern over the entrance door, and the begonias in the beds along the wall, the big dogs dragging at their chains to come and meet me, the huge tumbling puppy, the gardener's babies, Therese and Robert, bringing Therese's new rag doll to show me. I started motoring only about 10 o'clock for Paris. It was market day in the Place. There were the rust-red and burnt umber awnings, and the women's blue aprons and clattering sabots. There were many magpies in the road. Un pied, tant pis, deux pieds, tant mieux, and one must bow 9 times to each of them. The country was dim and blue in the gauze lights of the morning. The road was empty between the poplar trees. It was good to see the peasants at work in the fields, and the life of the villages going its way in the morning streets. I tried to get the papers in Compiègne, but they were not yet come. There were many soldiers about. It was the road through Senlis and Chantilly. The trainers had the race-horses out at exercise in the misty forest roads. I thought, there can't be war. Lusache and Ecouen and Saint-Denis, and then Paris. I got out of the car on the boulevard. There were many people out, and I went with the swing of the crowd up and down. It was good to be in the swing of a crowd. People hurried and people dallied. People stood and looked into shop windows. People sat and sipped things on cafe terraces. People pushed and elbowed. People stopped and stood where they were, reading the noon papers. Strangers spoke to one another, if the swing of the crowd threw them for an instant together. Everybody looked at one another with a queer new sudden need of each other, and they all felt more or less one thing together. After a while I went to my own home. I thought I had never seen the Place de la Concorde so beautiful, oval and white, or crossed the bridge with a deeper sense of going home. My own little place was very quiet, all the big houses closed, nobody left but the sentinels before the palace, and the concierge in their doorways with their cats and canaries. Our concierge and I were more glad ever than usual to see one another. Old Boudet, in his habitual shirt sleeves, feeling evidently particularly socialistic, was yet quite tolerant of me, and sweet, slow, fat, very respectable Mother Boudet, whose gentleness always seems begging one to excuse shirt sleeves and politics, was so ready to cry that I kissed her. Our rooms were sad. Things moved back and covered over, blinds closed. I did not stay long in those rooms. I did not try to see anyone. It was not people I had wanted, only Paris. I started back early. I want to remember all the things of the way back into the country, everything of the fields, red warm ploughed earth and fresh-cut grass and tall clover, everything of the forests, lights and mists and shadows, depths of moss and fern, everything of the villages, stone stairways and hearth fires, the pot-au-feu, cows and people's living. At Compiègne, I stopped in the Grand Place to read the news scrawled in chalk on the blackboard before the mairie. A sense of things that were happening came to me less from the words on the bulletin than from the faces of the people in the crowd before it. Thursday, July 30th. Early in the morning, a friend of mine telephoned from her people's chateau across the two forests to tell me that her husband was arranging for her to take the babies tomorrow up to Paris. He said that in '70s the Germans had come that way, by the grand old historic road, down upon Paris. The chateau had then passed through dreadful times. If there were war, he would have to go out on the first day. He would have his babies then far off from the danger he did not, of course, believe in. She told me all he said. She thought it was a great bother. Would we come over that afternoon for tea? I picked sweet peas and raspberries down by the well, and wrote a lot of letters in my North Tower room. That her husband felt like that about it filled me with a sense of disaster, like the thunder and red I kept dreaming of. We motored over after lunch, through the soft, vague, intimate country that has no especial beauty, and that is so beautiful. Someone called to us from the children's wing. It was Miss, and she said, "No one will come to the door. Go straight in. Madame is there. We are leaving now in 5 minutes." The children's mother stood halfway down the long white gallery. She looked very small and young. She said, "He won't let us wait till tomorrow. He has telephoned. We are going now, in 5 minutes." Down the long white length of the gallery, we saw the children's grandmother in the billiard room, sitting against the big south window. She had the little baby in her arms, and the two bigger ones stood close against her. I went to her. She said, "You see, I am minding the babies." She said that just because one had to say something and not cry. We went away quickly. Wide misty fields under another red war sunset. I thought how one felt war in the sunset. As we went, dusk came, gathering, deepening, very soft and kind. The fields and sky were darkly blue. There was a clear edge of the world between the fields and the sky, and over the edge of the world there was a slim little new white moon. There was a small clear singing of field birds in the dusk, and there were bats abroad and swallows. Friday, July 31st. The beggars came as usual to the chateau for their Friday morning sou. There were the usual dozen of them, old men and women with babies, and old women, and Margot, the girl who was Innocente, with her nodding head and hands that would never keep still. They came out of their holes in the marble quarries, and from nobody knew quite where, according to their long custom. All that was just as usual, but they were not as usual. They were angry because Venus and Olga, the great Danes of the moat bridge, barked at them. Venus and Olga always barked at them, But the beggars never had been angry before. Before they had been, as always, apologetic and conciliatory. An old woman with wild white hair screamed at the butler, who came with a sou, and a young woman with a baby in her arms, and 2 babies hiding in her skirts, shook her fist at the chateau windows. There was a sound of growling, snarling voices, more ugly than the dogs barking in the court of the lime trees. I went out to talk with the beggars. I was afraid of them, ridiculously and terribly, as one is afraid of things in dreams. That especially terrible fear which belongs to dreams, exaggerated, absurd, seems to be fallen suddenly, somehow, upon everything. I was afraid of the wild white hair of the old woman in the shawl, and of Margot's twitching, clutching, crazy hands. I do not want to write about this day. I will always try not to remember it. After dinner, we walked in the garden and along the rampart walls. We went to feed the rabbits. How absurd to be heartbroken, because it may be the last time that we ever shall feed cabbage leaves to the rabbits. Now, writing in the North Tower room, I feel a strange commotion in the village. How wide awake the village is, so late. There are footsteps going up and down the streets, up and down, and voices under the ramparts. The sound of footsteps and voices is strange in the night. Why are the people going up and down like that? Of what are they talking? There is the sound of a drum. The sound of the drum comes across the moat, past the dungeon tower, through the lime trees of the entrance court, along the dim halls and corridors. The drumming stops. A man's voice takes up the reading out, very loud, of something, to the hush that has fallen on footsteps and voices. End of section 1.